This game is awful. I started playing Devil May Cry 2 immediately after finishing my review of the first one, and I gotta say, I was initially pretty hyped for it. The story seemed like it had potential, all the animations are smooth as molasses, thank goodness they added the ability to roll, and the soundtrack is absolutely bumpin'. And that's it. That's all that's good about Devil May Cry 2. What was that, a paragraph? A pretty short one too. Can I really think of nothing else positive to say? No, actually that's it. Let's talk about why. The game starts and we're introduced to our two protagonists, Dante, who will be familiar to anyone who played the first game, and Lucia, who's a blank slate. Nothing really happens in this introduction, nothing that gets the plot moving, nothing that tells us much of anything. We have no idea where or when this takes place or why it matters or what's going on, which would be okay if we got some sort of explanation later in the game, but we do not. The plot in the first game was cheesy and poorly written, but at least it was there. The story in this game is split between Dante and Lucia. Whichever one you decide to play through first will leave you frustratingly confused and almost upset at how little the story makes sense until you play the second campaign and see the events from the other character's perspective. And even then, none of it really makes sense.
What's going on?
The story is just as dumb as the first game's, except all of the fun has been carefully removed. For all intents and purposes, Dante is a completely different character. He barely says anything, and literally none of it matters. Apparently this game takes place some time after the first game, long enough for his entire personality to melt away. Most of the time he just looks bored. Sounds bored too.
Now we can stop Arius's ambition.
Whatever.
Anything that was unique at all about Dante as a protagonist has been cast aside for a generic edgy anime character who only speaks in half-baked one-liners.
A false coin for a false god.
No personality, no charm, boring.
I know.
All that would be fine and dandy if the gameplay was any different. The difference in level design is most apparent. While DMC 1 had you exploring a detailed medieval castle piece by piece, Devil May Cry 2 is content having the player walk down brown, linear corridors one after the other. Nothing about this game's 32 missions are visually interesting. While the maps may be slightly more open than the first's, it sacrifices almost everything in terms of interesting or engaging level design. I mean, just look at it. It's so boring, unoriginal, bland, uninspired, lazy. You go down one corridor, solve some dumb puzzle or platforming segment, then go down another corridor and maybe fight a boss. It's just not much fun at all. So what? The levels are boring. Surely the combat is this game's saving grace? Not really. It's mostly just the same from the first game, except there are 3 weapons and all of them have the same basic moveset, with Dante grunting after every swing, which gets old pretty quick. You no longer are able to buy new moves from the vendor. They replace that with straightforward upgrades for your weapons, which doesn't add anything new. In fact, I'm not sure what upgrading weapons even does, because it doesn't seem to make much difference at all. You do occasionally find character upgrades that give you special abilities like being able to fly while in Devil Trigger mode, but nothing too interesting nor useful. They still refuse to allow the player to aim the camera manually, still using the automatic camera angles from the first game. Admittedly, it's been improved and there are far less times it actually becomes a problem, but the fact that it becomes a problem at all means they probably should have ditched it. Also, the targeting system is such a piece of crap you'll be swinging at the wrong enemy half the time. Also, the game's difficulty was scaled back way too much. Dying with a yellow orb in your inventory now resurrects you on the spot, and dying without one only sends you back a few rooms over instead of making you restart the level. Not that you'll be dying much because enemies are practically brain dead, only deciding to swing at you maybe once a week if they're not too busy killing themselves. They'll helplessly stand by as you tear through them one by one. If, miraculously, a regular enemy does manage to hit you, it'll barely take a notch off your health, which is hardly an inconvenience considering how many health pickups are haphazardly scattered around the levels. The only real challenge this game offers is in the form of boss fights, of which there are quite a few. Too many, in my opinion. Every other level, you're greeted with another crappy boss that dies in 5 minutes or less. Sometimes you'll beat a boss and immediately afterwards be greeted by another boss. Some of them are visually interesting and a few of them are even fun to fight, but they never fit the level's theme and they just appear out of nowhere with no explanation. Near the end of the game, the devs literally copy and paste the first boss fight of Devil May Cry 1 into the level. Same model, same attack patterns, except this time it's painfully easy because of how overpowered the player is. I have no idea idea why they decided to include this boss, and I have a feeling it wasn't just because they thought that the inclusion of Phantom would be a really awesome callback that just had to be implemented. It's a missed opportunity too, because Phantom actually spoke in the first game. It and Dante had a fun little exchange whenever they fought.
I hope for your sake you got something inside that big body of yours.
So I thought that maybe the writers would recognize this and actually do something to make Phantom's inclusion seem like less of a lazy copy and paste to add one more boss into the game. But nope. Dante is as silent as boring as ever, barely batting an eyelid when a demon he fought years ago comes out of nowhere. In the end, the boss fights are made agonizingly easy by the raw power of your guns. If you want anything dead, all you have to do is go into Devil Trigger mode and spam the X button to unleash super fast, super powerful barrages of bullets that cut through enemies like butter. The second and final boss fight, a twisted amalgamation of some other bosses in the game, is made sleep-inducing when you realize you can just stand back and spam the rocket launcher. The game isn't too easy because the guns are actually useful, the game is too easy because nothing is more useful. Once you've killed the hilarious main villain who's had almost no screen time,
My dream! My life! I was going to be the king of this world!
King? Yeah. Here's your crown.
Okay, real quick side note, that's the only cool thing he does in this game, so it doesn't even count. The game uses the exact same plot twist from the first game where the love interest was actually created by the villain all along, and Dante says the same stupid line.
No. Devils never cry.
Except this time, it's more depressing than it is funny. You go to the underworld or something and kill, I have no idea because the game doesn't explain any of this, and Dante's campaign is over. The game urges you to challenge Luciadisk next, and I'll be honest, there's nothing I could have been less excited for. Lucia's campaign uses the same enemies, same bosses, and same maps from Dante's, except, get this, you have to go through the levels backwards. Wow, cool, right? Wrong. This game was a major disappointment on just about every level. Anything unique or exciting about the first game was either removed or made worse in some way. The levels are boring, the enemies are boring, the story is boring, this game is boring. The only thing that pushed me forward into actually completing the game was the thought that if I finished this review, I could finally start playing Devil May Cry 3. So, that's what I'm gonna go do. My name is JaBoc, and I hope we meet again. Where's the jackpot? Why didn't he say jackpot? Why didn't he do that?